The first time Bianca Sterling saw Marcus Hale's tow truck, she told security it belonged behind a junkyard, not outside her showroom. It was parked at the edge of the marble driveway in front of Sterling Motor House, a rusted red and black wrecker with faded doors, a cracked passenger mirror, oversized tires, and a steel boom that looked too heavy for the truck beneath it. The paint had peeled in long strips along the hood. The front bumper was dented on one side. The winch cable was thick, dark, and scarred from years of work. On the passenger door, painted by hand in white letters, were the words Hale Recovery. Marcus stood beside it in a weathered work jacket, one hand resting on the boom control panel, grease under his fingernails, rain clouds gathering behind him. His 8-year-old daughter Sophie sat inside the cab with a purple backpack on her lap and a toy tow truck hooked to one finger. Bianca crossed the driveway in white heels, followed by her sales director, 2 assistants, and several clients who had been looking at a silver Lamborghini near the glass entrance. She did not lower her voice. "Who allowed that thing on my property?" The clients turned. Bianca Sterling had built her dealership group on one rule: everything visible had to increase desire. The truck did the opposite. Marcus looked at her calmly. "I was called for the Maserati in Service Bay 2. That was before I saw what you drove." A salesman laughed first, then another. One client smiled behind his coffee cup. Bianca looked at the truck again. "This is Sterling Motor House. We sell Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bentleys, and cars most people only see in magazines. I will not have a rusted tow truck sitting in front of my entrance while clients are here." Marcus said nothing. Sophie looked through the windshield, toy truck held tighter in her hand. Bianca stepped closer and pointed at the wrecker. "That truck is junk." Marcus looked at the tow truck the way other men might look at an old friend who had survived something. "No," he said, "it just looks that way to people who never needed one." The sentence made the driveway go quiet for half a second. Bianca smiled, not because she was amused, but because she had decided he had become inconvenient. "Remove it now, and do not bill us. I'll call someone with proper equipment." Marcus nodded once, opened the cab door, and helped Sophie slide across the seat. Before climbing in, she looked at Bianca and said softly, "My dad's truck saves things." Bianca did not answer. She turned back toward the showroom with the confidence of a woman who believed the moment was finished. 8 hours later, she would stand barefoot in 3 inches of water inside her underground display vault, while red emergency lights flashed over $40 million in supercars. A Ferrari Monza, 2 Lamborghinis, a Bugatti Chiron, a Porsche Carrera GT, and 6 rare collector vehicles would sit trapped below street level as floodwater pushed through the loading ramp. The power would fail. The hydraulic gates would jam. Every polished recovery company she called would refuse the job. And the only truck in the city, built for the kind of impossible pull that night required, was the one she had called junk in front of her clients. Sterling Motor House sat on the west side of Arden City, where old warehouses had become rooftop restaurants, luxury offices, and glass-fronted businesses that sold experiences as much as products. The showroom had Italian stone floors, black walls, museum lighting, and a coffee bar where clients could pretend they were not nervous about spending more on a car than most families spent on a house. Bianca had inherited one dealership from her father and turned it into 6 locations across 3 states. She understood image better than anyone around her. She knew where a car should be placed so sunlight hit the curve of its fender. She knew which clients wanted silence, which wanted applause, and which wanted to be told no before they said yes. To Bianca, luxury was not only money, it was control. That control extended beneath the building. Below the showroom, accessible by a private ramp behind steel security doors, was the collection level. Employees called it the vault. It held rare cars, consignment vehicles, investor inventory, and the models Bianca used to impress clients who needed to feel chosen before they signed. The vault had climate control, cameras, polished floors, and a drainage system upgraded 3 years earlier after a city inspection. On paper, it was safe. On paper, the backup pump capacity was sufficient. On paper, the gate could be opened manually if power failed. Marcus Hale trusted paper less than most people. He had spent 15 years pulling vehicles from ditches, rivers, burned highways, collapsed parking decks, ice storms, and once from the second floor of a half-demolished warehouse after a stolen pickup drove through a wall. He had been part of a heavy rescue crew before starting Hale Recovery. Back then, he worked nights, storms, accidents, and the kinds of calls other drivers avoided because they involved danger, liability, or both. His wife, Alina, used to call the truck his second heartbeat. She died 3 years earlier in a winter pileup on Interstate 47. The accident left him with Sophie, a mortgage he could no longer carry, and a silence in the house that made him volunteer for every difficult call until his body finally refused. He sold the house, rented a small place near Sophie's school, and kept the truck. The truck was not junk. It was a 1996 heavy-duty wrecker rebuilt from bumper to tail. The frame had been reinforced by a retired bridge welder. The winch system was custom geared for slow, controlled pulls under unstable conditions. Marcus had added floodlights, a small water pump, traction anchors, extra snatch blocks, insulated gloves, battery tools, and a hydraulic bypass system most modern tow trucks did not carry. It looked ugly because Marcus spent money on what made it work, not what made it shine. That morning, Sterling Motor House called because a Maserati had locked its transmission inside Service Bay 2 and needed to be moved without damaging the underbody. Marcus arrived with Sophie because school had closed early after a boiler leak, and the neighbor who usually helped had a doctor's appointment. He almost canceled. Sophie told him she could sit in the cab and draw. "I don't want people looking at you funny," Marcus said. Sophie looked at him, as if adults were sometimes very slow. "They already do that." He had no answer for that, so he brought her. After Bianca sent him away, Marcus drove 3 blocks and pulled into a gas station. Sophie had been quiet since the dealership. He parked beside the air pump and turned off the engine. "You okay?" "She was mean." "Yes." "Does she know she was mean?" "Maybe, maybe not." "Why didn't you tell her the truck is not junk?" He looked at the faded hood. Some people don't hear facts until trouble translates them. Sophie thought about that and wrote it in her notebook, because she had started collecting things her father said after her mother died, afraid they might disappear if she did not keep them somewhere. By noon, rain began. By 3, it became heavy enough that gutters along the old part of Arden City overflowed. Most businesses sent people home early. Sterling Motor House stayed open because 2 out-of-state clients had flown in to view a private collection car in the vault, and Bianca did not cancel appointments for weather unless weather entered the building. At 4:20, her facility manager, Darren Pike, mentioned that the lower ramp drain was running slow. Bianca looked up from a finance call. "Slow how?" "Water collecting near the bottom edge. Pumps are active." "Is inventory at risk?" "Not currently." "Then monitor it." Darren hesitated. "There's a city storm line behind the west alley. If it backs up." "Darren." He stopped. "If there is a real issue, bring me a real warning, not weather anxiety." He left with the expression of a man who had been told to wait until a problem grew teeth. At 5:05, a client named Victor Lang arrived to inspect a black Ferrari Monza SB2 stored in the vault. He came with a consultant, a driver, and the atmosphere of a man used to making people prove they deserved his patience. Bianca guided him downstairs personally. The vault looked perfect. That was the problem with slow disasters. They often look perfect until they no longer can. The cars sat beneath soft white lighting, each spaced like sculpture. The Ferrari Monza near the center, a blue Bugatti Chiron at the back, a yellow Lamborghini Aventador or SVJ under a cover, a silver Porsche Carrera GT beside a vintage Mercedes 300 SL. Along the far wall, a row of rare trade-ins waited under branded dust covers. Victor smiled. "Now this," he said, "is why I came." Bianca smiled back. The floor beneath their shoes was already damp near the ramp. At 5:37, the city storm line behind the West Alley failed. Water did not enter dramatically at first. It pressed upward through the drain grates, a dark bubbling pulse that looked like something alive pushing from below. Then the ramp water reversed. The lower drain overflowed. Rainwater from the alley and street began flowing down the private vehicle ramp toward the vault gates. Darren called Bianca 3 times before she answered. "I need you downstairs now." "I am downstairs." "Not the collection side, the ramp side." His voice made her turn. By the time she reached the service corridor, water was coming under the gate. Not dripping, moving. Darren and 2 technicians were trying to activate the secondary pump. It coughed, started, then died. A red fault light blinked on the control panel. "Why is the gate still closed?" Bianca demanded. "It jammed halfway in the track." "Open it manually." "We tried." "Try harder." Darren looked at her. "If we force it without relieving pressure, we might lose the whole mechanism." A technician shouted from below. "Water in the vault." Bianca ran back. The perfect floor was no longer perfect. Water had spread in a thin silver sheet under the first row of vehicles. The Ferrari's front tires sat in water shallow enough to look harmless and deep enough to begin the countdown. Victor Lang's smile vanished. "What is happening?" Bianca's phone began ringing. Natalie from the front desk. Security. Darren, a board member. The calls overlapped. The room filled with voices. She cut through them. "Start moving cars." A technician ran toward the Ferrari. Darren grabbed his arm. "With what?" "The ramp is flooding, the gate is jammed, and we have maybe 6 inches of clearance on the turn angle. We need recovery equipment." "Call Prestige Transport." "They won't enter floodwater below grade." "Call Metro Exotic Recovery." "They're north of the river. Roads are closing." "Call every tow company in the city." Darren looked at the water creeping around the Bugatti's tires. "Most of them can't get down that ramp. The angle is too steep." Bianca's face hardened. "Then find one that can." At 6:18, Marcus was in his garage making grilled cheese for Sophie on a hot plate because the stove in their apartment had tripped the breaker again, and he had not had time to fix it. Rain hit the garage roof hard enough to make conversation feel private. His phone rang. A voice on the line said, "Sorry, I'm calling every recovery service. We have a flood incident at Sterling Motor House. Underground vault. High-value vehicles. Immediate extraction needed." Marcus looked at the rain beyond the open bay door. "Who is this?" "Darren Pike, facility manager." "Sterling Motor House." Sophie looked up from the small office table. "Dad," Marcus asked, "did Miss Sterling authorize this call?" Darren hesitated. "I did." "What's the condition?" "Flooding lower vehicle vault. Ramp access compromised, gate jammed, power unstable, cars still inside, water rising." "How many cars?" "At least 12 at risk, 6 urgent." "Any electric vehicles?" 2 hybrids, 1 fully electric Porsche taken in the side bay." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Electric vehicles and rising water were a different category of bad. Kill power to lower charging circuits. Do not start any car sitting in water. Do not let anyone stand between a vehicle and the ramp. I'm 20 minutes away if roads are open." When he hung up, Sophie was already putting her sandwich in a napkin. "Are we going?" "I need to take you to Mrs. Alvarez. She's at her sister." Marcus had forgotten. He looked toward the truck, then at his daughter. "This is not a safe call." Sophie nodded. "I'll stay in the cab like always." "No, not like always. Mom said the truck helps when people run out of choices." Marcus froze. Sophie did not use her mother's words often. He swallowed, grabbed his rain jacket, and said, "Seat belt the whole time. If I say stay, you stay." "I know." The old wrecker started on the first turn. At Sterling Motor House, Bianca stood ankle-deep in water near the vault entrance, phone pressed to her ear, voice controlled only because control was the last expensive thing she had left. A representative from Prestige Transport said again, "We can stage outside, but we cannot descend into active floodwater. Our insurance won't allow it. I will sign a release. That does not change physics." She ended the call. Darren approached carefully. "I found someone." "Who?" He did not want to say it. "Hale Recovery." Bianca turned slowly. For a moment the room disappeared and she saw the rusted truck in her driveway, the man beside it, the child in the cab, and her own finger pointing. "No." Darren stared at her. "There is nobody else close enough with the equipment." Bianca looked toward the vault. Water had reached the Ferrari's lower body. A technician had placed absorbent barriers near the Mercedes, a gesture so small against the flood it was almost painful. Victor Lang stood with his consultant near the stairs, furious and wet. "If that Monza is damaged, Miss Sterling, this becomes very simple." Bianca did not answer him. For the first time that day, pride became more expensive than apology. At 6:43, the sound of the old wrecker reached the dealership before the truck appeared. It was not smooth. It was not elegant. It came through the rain with a low diesel growl and a metallic rattle from the tool compartments. The headlights cut across the flooded driveway. Water pushed away from its tires as it turned toward the service entrance. Employees gathered under the awning. Bianca stood just inside the glass, soaked at the bottom of her trousers, watching the truck she had ordered removed that morning pull into the place every polished company had refused to enter. Marcus stepped out wearing a dark rain coat over his work shirt. Sophie remained in the passenger seat, seat belt fastened, face serious behind the rain-streaked window. Bianca went outside. For half a second, neither of them spoke. Then she said, "Mr. Hale." He opened a side compartment and pulled out gloves. "Where's the ramp?" "This way." "Any live charging circuits below?" "We believe they're off." "That's not an answer." Darren hurried forward. "Main lower chargers are shut off. I cannot confirm an auxiliary service outlet near the west wall." Marcus looked at him. "Then nobody touches water near the west wall until I check it." Bianca said, "The cars." "The cars wait until people are safe." That sentence cut through the rain harder than a shout. Bianca closed her mouth. Marcus walked the ramp before moving the truck. He tested water depth, checked the grade, inspected the jammed gate, listened to the pump, and looked at the vault layout from the top step. His face did not change, but Darren saw enough to become more afraid. "How bad?" Darren asked. "Bad. Can you get them out?" Marcus looked down at the angle, the water, the gate track, the vehicle spacing, and the polished floor becoming a pool. "Not all at once, not without mistakes." Bianca stepped closer. "Start with the Ferrari Monza." Marcus did not look at her. "Start with the electric Porsche." Victor Lang snapped, "The Monza is worth more than." Marcus turned. "If that Porsche battery goes into thermal trouble in rising water, Your Ferrari becomes the least important thing in the room. No one argued after that. The next hour became a lesson in what real expertise looks like when it has no time to introduce itself. Marcus positioned the wrecker at the top of the ramp, not straight, but angled slightly to account for cable load and traction. He set wheel chocks, deployed stabilizers, attached a snatch block to a structural column after testing it twice, and ran the winch line through a path that looked wrong to everyone until the first pull showed it was exactly right. "Slow is smooth," he told Darren. "Smooth is safe. Nobody steps over a live cable. Nobody walks behind a rolling car. If I raise my hand, everyone freezes." Bianca stood near the service entrance, forced by circumstance into obedience. Sophie watched from the cab, fogging the window with her breath, toy tow truck in one hand. The take-in came first. Water had reached the lower door line. Marcus used insulated gloves, a wheel cradle, and a soft strap pattern to avoid pulling against compromised points. The car resisted the first movement, then rolled inch by inch up the ramp as the winch groaned. The old truck held. Its rear suspension settled. The cable tightened like a drawn line in the air. At the top, the take-in cleared the flood line and rolled onto dry ground. A technician shouted with relief, but Marcus held up one hand. "Chock it, isolate it. Nobody opens the battery compartment." Next came the Ferrari Monza. Victor Lang stood rigid as Marcus rigged the pull. The car's low clearance made the ramp angle dangerous. One wrong pull would scrape the body, damage the underside, or send the car sideways into the wall. Marcus crouched in water, rain running down his neck, and placed the straps by hand. Bianca watched him work and remembered calling the truck junk. The Ferrari moved. Slowly, inches at a time. Halfway up the ramp, the right rear tire slipped on the wet surface. A salesman gasped. Victor cursed. Bianca's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus had already compensated. He adjusted tension through the secondary line, signaled Owen, a sterling mechanic who had begun following orders without being asked, and brought the Ferrari straight again. When it reached the top, even Victor Lang said nothing. He simply touched the hood with one hand like a man, confirming something had returned from war. At 7:32, the power failed completely. The dealership went dark except for emergency lights and the flood beams Marcus had mounted on his truck. Red lights swept through the rain. The vault below became a shadowed basin of water, chrome, and danger. Bianca's phone battery was at 12%. Her shoes were gone. Her hair had fallen from its perfect shape. She stood beside the wrecker, no longer looking like the woman from the morning, and watched Marcus prepare for the Bugatti. The Chiron was the hardest pull. It sat near the back of the vault, angled behind two other cars. To reach it, Marcus had to pull a Lamborghini first, reposition the cable through a second block, and move a rolling jack in water deep enough to hide the floor seams. The pump he had brought from the truck ran near the ramp edge, buying minutes but not victory. Darren said, "Water is still rising." Marcus nodded. "I know. How long can you keep this up?" Marcus looked at the truck. "As long as it holds." Bianca heard the answer differently than he intended. "As long as it holds." It seemed suddenly to describe more than steel. At 8:05, the Lamborghini came out. At 8:26, the Bugatti began moving. The crowd outside had grown. Employees, clients, neighbors, even drivers from two recovery companies who had refused the job stood under awnings watching the rusted wrecker pull million-dollar machines out of the flooded dark one by one. Nobody laughed now. As the Bugatti reached the steepest part of the ramp, the old gate shifted. A metal crack echoed through the lower level. Darren shouted, "Gate track." The jammed security gate, bent by water pressure and repeated vibration, lurched downward several inches. Not enough to fall, enough to threaten the path. Marcus saw it and moved before thought became language. He signaled stop, locked the winch, grabbed a steel brace from the truck and ran down the ramp. Water splashed around his knees. The gate groaned again. Bianca shouted, "Marcus!" Sophie pressed both hands against the cab window. Marcus wedged the brace into the track and hammered it with 3 violent strikes. The gate held. He looked up, rain and sweat cutting clean paths through the grime on his face. Pull! Owen engaged the winch at the speed Marcus had set. The Bugatti cleared the gate with less than 2 inches to spare. When it reached the top, the crowd erupted, not with polished applause, with the raw sound of people who had watched disaster lose ground. Marcus did not celebrate. He went back down for the Mercedes. By 9:10, 6 priority vehicles were safe. By 9:40, 9 were out. By 10:15, the final collector car cleared the ramp just as the water reached the height where starting any remaining vehicle would have been reckless. The vault was damaged, equipment was lost, the floor would need repair, the drainage system would be rebuilt at great cost. But the collection survived. $40 million in vehicles sat across the service floor under emergency lights, wet but alive. Marcus shut down the winch and leaned one hand against the truck. For the first time that night, Bianca saw his hand shake. Sophie jumped from the cab before he could stop her and ran to him. He crouched, soaked and exhausted, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. "Dad, the truck did it," she said. Marcus closed his eyes. "We did some of it." She looked at the cars around them. "No, the truck did the truck part. You did the dad part." Darren turned away and wiped his face with the back of his hand, blaming the rain though they were under cover. Bianca stood several feet away, unable to find the version of herself that had words ready for every room. Finally, she stepped closer. "Sophie," she said. The girl looked at her cautiously. Bianca lowered herself enough to meet her eyes. "This morning, I said something cruel about your father's truck." Sophie nodded. "Yes. I was wrong. Yes." A few employees looked at the floor. Marcus did not intervene. Bianca accepted the second yes because she deserved it. "I am sorry." Sophie studied her. "Do you know why it looks old?" Bianca glanced at the wrecker. "No. Because Dad fixes the parts that matter first." The sentence hit Bianca harder than the flood had. She looked at Marcus. "I am sorry," she said again, this time to him. Marcus stood slowly. "Apology accepted." She seemed almost surprised. "That's all." "No, the bill comes later." For the first time all night, Darren laughed. Bianca almost did too, but the emotion turned into something else before it reached her face. The next morning, every local news station had the story. Not because Bianca wanted publicity, but because half the city had recorded the rescue. The clips were everywhere. The old wrecker at the top of the flooded ramp, the Ferrari emerging under red lights, the Bugatti clearing the broken gate, Marcus standing in rain while people in suits watched him like he had performed a miracle. The most shared clip showed Bianca in her white suit that morning, pointing at the truck and calling it junk, followed by the same truck saving her collection that night. By noon, Bianca called Marcus and asked him to come to the dealership. He almost said no. Then he looked at Sophie, who was drawing the wrecker pulling a red car out of blue water. "Want to go see the cars?" he asked. She nodded so fast her pencil fell. When they arrived, the driveway was clean, but the building still smelled faintly of wet concrete and stress. Employees turned as the old truck pulled in. No one asked him to move it. The valet, who had laughed the morning before, opened the passenger door for Sophie. She looked at him. "Thank you." He looked embarrassed. "Yes, ma'am." Inside, Bianca waited near the service floor. She wore a black suit this time, flat shoes, and no performance smile. The rescued cars were arranged in a line for inspection. Victor Lang stood beside the Ferrari Monza, speaking quietly to Darren. When he saw Marcus, he walked over. "You saved my car," Victor said. Marcus shook his hand. "I moved it out of water." Victor looked at the old truck through the glass wall. "That is a very modest way to describe a thing I could not buy my way out of." Marcus did not know what to do with that, so he nodded. Bianca led him upstairs to the conference room. Sophie sat beside him, feet not touching the floor, toy tow truck placed carefully on the table. Around them sat Bianca, Darren, the legal counsel, the CFO, and 2 board members on video. The mood was formal but not like before. Before, formality had been a wall. Now it felt like a room trying to behave around the truth. Bianca began. "Sterling Motor House avoided catastrophic loss last night because Mr. Hale had equipment, judgment, and courage that our approved vendors did not provide." The CFO cleared his throat. "There are still liability questions regarding unofficial recovery activity on premises." Bianca looked at him. "We can discuss liability after we discuss why our official emergency plan failed, and why the person I removed from our property was the person who saved it." The CFO stopped. Bianca turned to Marcus. "I would like Sterling Motor House to retain Hale Recovery as our official emergency recovery partner. Annual contract, equipment retainer, facility access, paid drills, full inspection of all lower-level vehicle movement risks." Marcus said nothing. "You want the junk truck on contract?" Bianca held his gaze. "I want the truck I failed to understand." Sophie looked at her father with wide eyes. Marcus asked, "What happens when my recommendation is inconvenient?" Bianca did not answer too quickly this time. "Then I will remember what inconvenience cost us yesterday." "Not good enough." Marcus continued. "If I tell you a car moves, it moves. If I tell you a ramp closes, it closes. If I tell you clients wait, they wait. I am not arguing with a sales schedule while water rises." Bianca nodded. "Agreed." Marcus looked at Sophie. She gave him the smallest nod, as if she were part of the board. He accepted. The money changed their life, but not as dramatically as people expected. Marcus paid overdue bills. He fixed the apartment stove. He replaced Sophie's winter coat before the first snow. He bought new tires for the truck, then apologized to it out loud when Sophie said the truck looked proud. Hale Recovery became busier, not because Marcus advertised, but because people had seen what happened when beauty ran out of answers and old steel kept working. 6 months later, Sterling Motor House reopened the renovated vault. The floor was new. The drainage had been rebuilt. Emergency pumps had triple redundancy. Manual gates actually opened manually. Vehicle extraction routes were marked with subtle brass indicators in the floor. Hale Recovery had run 2 drills, both of which irritated the sales team and pleased Marcus. At Bianca's insistence, the old wrecker was displayed outside during the reopening event. Marcus hated the idea. Sophie loved it. A small plaque stood beside it. Hale Recovery, the truck that saved the vault. Built for what still matters when everything else fails. Marcus read the plaque and looked at Bianca. "Too dramatic." She smiled. "I sell cars, Mr. Hale. Drama is part of the building. Just don't sell my truck." "I wouldn't dare." Near the end of the night, Bianca approached Marcus while he was checking the truck before leaving. "I never asked," she said. "Why keep it looking like this?" Marcus closed a compartment. "I don't keep it looking like anything. I keep it working. You could repaint it now." "I could. But you won't." He looked at the faded door. The hand-painted letters, the scratches, the dents, the places where the truck carried stories no showroom would know how to display. "No." "Why?" Sophie answered from the passenger side. "Because then people might forget." Bianca looked at her. "Forget what?" Sophie climbed onto the step and looked across the clean dealership, the bright windows, the clients, the cars, and the ramp where water had risen. "That old doesn't mean useless." Marcus smiled faintly. Bianca nodded. "I don't think anyone here will forget that soon." Sophie looked at the dealership. "Adults forget a lot." Bianca accepted it. She had learned to accept more true things lately. When Marcus and Sophie drove away, the old wrecker's lights reflected across the glass front of Sterling Motor House. Clients turned to watch it leave, not because it looked expensive. It did not. Not because it belonged among the supercars. It did not. They watched because everyone there knew that, when the storm came, the most important vehicle on the property had not been the Ferrari, the Bugatti, the Lamborghini, or anything locked in the vault. It had been the rusted truck at the edge of the driveway. The one everybody could see. And almost nobody understood.